Hello, friends, and welcome to today's episode. He knelt down in the driveway and looked under his car to look at the damage he had just done. He thought his day couldn't get any worse. But just as he was about to look more closely at the concrete steps, he heard the terrible sound that made his heart drop in his chest. What did he discover? You never know what you're getting into when you buy a new house. But Simon Marks, who was 37 years old at the time, just couldn't say no when he found a house in Luton, England, for a great price. Even though the paperwork was signed quickly and the move was already in progress, he never asked why the owner was so eager to get rid of it. A few months later, Simon was excited to open the boxes he had just moved. He couldn't wait to sleep in his new house for the first time. After carrying his things back and forth all weekend, he was tired and went to bed. He happily set his alarm for 8 a.m. after figuring out how far his new, much faster route to work was. But as he lay in the dark, he heard something strange. He tried not to breathe as he listened. Then it happened again. The sound came from outside. The sound was dull and muffled, like dirt scraping against metal. He got up and stuck his head out the window to look around the yard. Nothing moved, though. Everything was quiet again. He shrugged his shoulders and got back into bed, but he had no idea that his new house was moving. Simon put his black Vauxhall Zafira into reverse the next morning. But instead of leaving his garage in reverse, the car lurched forward. He cursed and tried again, but it seemed like the wheel was stuck on something. He let out a sigh of relief after revving the engine until the car jumped backward. But his stomach dropped when he got out of the car and saw what was stuck under the front wheel. Simon got down on his knees to get a better look and saw that the driveway steps were broken. The driveway then started to give way right in front of his eyes. He jumped back as the pavers snapped and the concrete crumbled and fell into the ground. But when the dust started to clear, the crack in the ground showed something that was really scary. Now, Simon knew that the old couple who had lived in his house before him had built it in the 1970s, but this was not on the house plans. When he was sure it was safe to put his weight on the bricks around him, he lay on his stomach and moved forward in small steps. He got a trowel and started digging when he saw something shiny in the ground. The mud was easy to move, and he soon saw a piece of metal sticking out of the ground. He used his hands to open it up until he could grab it, and then he pulled with all his strength. No matter how hard Simon pulled, the rusty piece of metal wouldn't move. He decided to try digging around the strange thing to try to get it out of the ground. As he found more and more of the metal bit, he could see that it was connected to something. When Simon first saw the black hole opening up, he couldn't stop thinking about his car and, even worse, his whole house falling into it. But when he looked more closely and saw an object made by humans shining through, he knew he was dealing with something much worse. He took out his phone and made a call for help. Gerald, Simon's dad, ran to the scene as fast as he could. And, even though they didn't have any expert tools or gear, the two of them got to work. They carefully started to take away the broken concrete around the metal piece, showing a square hole in the ground. There was a rusty ladder going down into the darkness. Now, they were starting to get worried. Why did they hide this secret tunnel under the driveway? Where was it going? Only one way led to the answer. Before he bought the old house, Simon did a lot of study. He knew that city poles wouldn't be able to tell him anything about the mysterious tunnel under his garage. Reports say that before the house was built, there was nothing there but empty land. As they started to dig, he got a shiver down his spine. They took shovelful after shovelful of the thick mud and put it in buckets to take it away. Hour by hour, the pile of dirt next to them got bigger. Soon, the two of them had carefully dug out about 5 feet of dirt, which was enough for them to climb down the ladder and check it out. And what they found would help explain the strange history of the house. Simon was halfway down the ladder when he started to feel strange. He did not want to keep going. What if it was dangerous? He quickly ran back home to get his selfie stick. He put his phone into the hole while it was still attached to him. He looked at the screen of his phone and saw that the secret tunnel led to 2 rooms. Gerald was sure he knew right away what they were looking at, but they had to be sure. About $500,000 was how much Simon paid for the land in question. But before the house was built there, the land was used for something else. The old man who sold Simon the house was the first person to live there, but he didn't tell Simon what was under the house. He heard noises the night before because the ground under the driveway finally gave way and fell into the secret room. Simon and his dad stopped digging and started doing their own study. They looked up the plot number, and then it was clear very quickly what was going on. Before the last people who lived in this house, this piece of land was empty. But Gerald pointed out right away that the land was in a good spot in the town. But the time in which the house was built was even more telling. Simon said, "When my dad saw it, he said right away that it was an air raid shelter. We Googled it and found that there are quite a few in this area." Simon found out that the shelter was made during World War II after doing some study. The previous owner must have known it was there, and when he built the house and put in a garden, he must have filled it in, Simon told the reporters. Sir John Anderson was given the job of getting the country ready for war in 1938, during World War II. He was in charge of coming up with a plan to protect the people of Britain from the attack and bombs he knew were coming. So, he came up with a clever plan to keep the people safe. Sir John Anderson and his team of engineers planned and helped make cheap, easy underground bunkers that could be easily buried in people's backyards. Because they were so close, British people could find cover at any time. The walls of these buildings were made of metal, which is lighter and more flexible than concrete. There were more than 2 million of these bomb bunkers all over the land. But Simon didn't find any of these things. Gerald could tell right away, just by looking at the room Simon had found, that it wasn't an Anderson-designed bomb bunker. But it was actually built around 1938, not long after a bomb fell near Luton. When people in the area heard that their small city was now a target, they were scared. They had to figure out how to stay safe in a better way. The people in the area quickly got together and came up with a plan to build a shelter that would be better able to survive the air raids. Gerald could tell that the shelter they had found was not an Anderson-style shelter because it was made of bricks and concrete and had at least 2 rooms. As Simon and Gerald dug deeper into the cave, they found some interesting things. Simon and Gerald found a piece of paper in one of the secret rooms. The Herald newspaper was from the time of World War II. One of the headlines read, "Luton Airport, is this the end?" Other stories talked about what was going on in the country every day during the war. This item gave them a rare look at what life was like in Britain during the war. However, it wasn't the only treasure they found. Simon and Gerald also found proof that the bomb shelter used to have food and water for the people who hid there. People who were held up in basement bunkers could be there for days at a time. Simon later told reporters, "It's crazy to think that it was all made by hand." Bricks and mortar had been added to the concrete walls of the underground shelter to make them stronger. This gave the shelter even more protection from the raids from above. But even after Simon and Gerald found the huge find, they still had more work to do. "We've had to dig. We're about 5 feet down right now, so we only have to go another 5 feet to finish." Simon said, "I think we'll have to rent a dumpster because there's so much trash to get rid of." Then, the two of them found something else. A wall has been built up with bricks. "I'm pretty sure there aren't any more rooms, but we don't know for sure." Simon told reporters, "They may have bricked up one of the walls when the house was built to make room for the foundations." "If that's the case, we'll just have to leave it," he said. But it didn't take long for the news to spread. As Simon and his dad kept digging, neighbors and news reporters started to crowd into his front yard to see the amazing and historic find. Simon didn't care much about all the attention he was getting, though. He had other things on his mind. He didn't dig up his yard for hours to get famous. Simon thought it was important to tell the world about what he had found, but not to get famous. He feels like he owes something to the long past of his country. He didn't want people to forget about this part of history. He wanted the air raid bunker to be kept so that it could be used by people in the future. So, what does he plan to do when he's finished cleaning out the shelter? Simon and his father want to fix up and keep the shelter. They hope that it will be named a historical and important landmark. They think that the war should not be hidden and forgotten just because it is over and has been for a long time. They hope that people will come to the shelter in the future to learn about an important part of history. That's it for today, friends. Please let us know what you think about this story. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon for more amazing stories.